You thought you could just go on Twitter, be this guru overnight. Nah, man, you gotta put the work in, baby. You gotta study, partner. You gotta take some bumps and bruises, man.
What determines a trend line? That's a wonderful question that nobody ever asks. So I'm happy somebody asked that. A trend line is determined by the advanced settings here. And identifying trend lines is a 3-step process, really 4. The first step is defining the rules, right? So these rules are in 2 places. One, it's up here. Do we want to draw wick to wick or body to body? Important, it'll change it. Rule 2, do we ignore or do we respect gaps in price action? Respecting gaps means never drawing a line where the point 1 and point 2 are separated by a gap. And you can define the size of that gap, right? So if it's set to ignore, it will still draw the line connecting those points. If it's set to respect, it will not. All right, so that's the first set of options. You kind of define the high-level rules. Next step, and I'm going to turn indicators off. Next step, this is how we get to the first step in analysis, right? This part. By the way, you see how these are curved, right? This is also a very unique thing about TrendSpider. These lines are drawn on a linear scale. I switched to a log scale. The scale changed. The lines are actually still straight, though. They're just looking curved because the scale is different. We're the only platform in the market that handles log scale properly. We put a lot of time into this, right? This curvature allows you... I'm going to show you guys something that I'm sure is completely off topic here. But this is like a...
This is why we're here, sir. We don't want the basic interview. Hi, Dan. What's your favorite color?
Okay,
This
so
is awesome.
this is a trend line, a random trend line drawn on a linear scale, right? The scale is even, goes up by $10 per tick. When I add log scale,
seen that.
scale,
How the hell?
the scale has changed, right? The line is the same, the scale has changed, but watch what happens when I add another line here with the same points, right? I'm going to add another line here.
What?
This line was drawn on a log scale. See how they will flip? They'll become concave or convex depending on which scale it is.
Wait a minute. So are the other charting softwares wrong?
Yes. Yep, they're doing log scales completely wrong. It's insane. I don't understand how they can get away with it because, like, algebra 101.
They're just
right?
they're just changing the endpoints.
Yeah. Yeah, they're actually just keeping the line and the angle the same regardless of the scale, right? So like the endpoints are the same, the line just doesn't curve,
Wait,
right?
Yeah, that just killed my mind because
Yeah.
I'm just now thinking about all the trend lines that do not curve when I flip between log and non-log, but I know the position
They should
changes.
curve. They
So
should
I'm curious
curve.
what the endpoint is. If they're trading if it's drawing a ray, it's got to be choosing the endpoint at the end of the candle.
I'll show you exactly what it does, right? Like this line is connecting this endpoint to this endpoint, right? So this is on log scale. This is not a great chart for it. I need to find one with a longer time period so it's just more visible, right? So, okay, we'll connect this endpoint to this endpoint, right? And we'll put an arrow here, and we'll clone the arrow and put it over here too, right? So that's linear scale. Now it's a log scale. I'm going to connect it here, right? This is doing it right, right? On other platforms, it's gonna go like it's just gonna be a straight line going this way. It's crazy.
Did you guys nail this initially, or did you have to?
Yes,
you did initially.
no, because Russ had spent so much time in this space. He knew he was like, this is one thing that drives me nuts about e-signal, right? I tried to fix it at TradingView. They didn't agree with me, right? So they left it the way it was, right? And I'm gonna fix it here finally.
I didn't even think it was curved.
Yeah. I use the hell out of this though, because like, let me find like a drawdown, like something that's been pulling back really hard, maybe Asana or something. Yeah. So like when you're looking for breakouts, right? Like I didn't draw that precisely, right? But when you're looking for breakouts on something like this, right? Like, look at that, right? You can't even draw this trend this way. right? Like look at how different they are. So if something hasn't broken out yet, like if this price action hadn't happened here, it was just on this candle, I would put both of these lines on this chart and wait for them both to break out before I would buy this, right? Because you can see what's happened here, right?
Yeah.
It broke out of this one and then it pulled back and it's now, teetering around this one. Well, not the best example, but I think you get the point.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that. But back to trend lines, because I do want to make sure to explain this. So step one is to identify all of these lines, the possible trend lines that might exist, right? Up to 2000 and then it stops. How does it do that? Right? Well, you have to tell it, right? And you do that by modifying the base points here. This is step one. And these numbers have to be odd, except for the last two, right? And these are the distance between point 1 and point 2 for it to draw a trend line. So it will only draw lines by connecting highs that are 11 candles or more apart to other highs. If I change this to something else, this whole thing will change, right? And this is set on a time frame basis. So this is daily. Like let's say if I make this 20, you're going to see a bunch of lines just disappear here in a second. See that? There's less of them. If I make this 5, now there's going to be a whole lot more of them, right? It might even freeze. Look at that. That's insane, right?
Cool.
So that's step one. Is actually up to the user to define the universe of trend lines that they want to start with, right? Step two is lines here. This is a filter that removes lines that are too far away from current price action at their current termination point to be relevant ever, right? So we set this as a multiple of the 14 period ATR. So it's set to 5, right? 8, depending on the time frame. That's how we get from here to here, right? We've now filtered out a bunch of lines. And then how do we get from there to here, right? That's where the formulas come in, right? Each of those 2000 lines we identify has variables tied to it. Hits, how many times it's touched the line. Points, how many times it's been part of a series of higher highs or higher lows. Points 2x, bigger higher highs, bigger higher lows, bounce up, bounce down, peak up, peak down, right? Length, violations, volume. All these variables are tracked for every one of those 2000 possible lines. And then you can define a formula that filters them, right? This one looks for lines that have peaks up minus violations divided by length, right? So the ratio of violations to peaks divided by the length, right? That line is this red line right here. You can tell by the color codes, right? Like I can change this and maybe it's this one. It's one of these. Oh, you know what? I didn't hit apply. That's why, right? So yeah, it's this one right here that's causing that line. So these color codes help you identify and develop your formulas, right? And you can go ahead and delete these and create your own. And you can do math in these. You can do calculus in this. Like it supports sin and log and all kinds of mathematical functions. So you can build your own analysis. It's not my style, and I don't tell it what the right way to draw a trend line is. That's up to you.
Is this something you see the institutional investors backtest as well or use?
This is literally they're the only people who use this.
Really?
I think I've seen maybe one retail guy who's like this super nerdy, brilliant dude. Smart guy, awesome trader. I think he's the only human I've ever seen use this. Right.
Is theirs the same? You mentioned it's like $500 per user. Is their version of TrendSpider different?
It has it's mostly the same. It has more collaboration features for teams.
Oh, that's cool.
It supports professional data entitlements. So if you're a pro, right, you can get pro data. And it has very high limits on how many alerts and bots and things like that you can run at one time. But otherwise, it's mostly the same, right? Cool. We're about to make some changes to the plans. Like we've looked at the data, right? What do people use, right? So like uploading custom data is going to become an advanced and enterprise only feature. There's a few things like that are going to be taken away from the lower plans. But we know that people on the lower plans don't use those things anyway, right? And they're kind of expensive to run, and that's how we did the math. Like we want to craft it so that institutions buy the expensive plan, right? Because then they can subsidize the product for everybody else. And I want this to be affordable. I don't want retail guys like you paying $500 a month to use TrendSpider. Like that wouldn't make any sense. So you know, it's too close to Bloomberg at that point. Like, you know, it's kind of insulting to make the claim of trying to democratize things and then to charge so much. So we try to pick the features that are so complex that a retail user is very unlikely to use them, and put them on the higher plans, because the only people that buy them are institutions, right? And they're the only ones that would need those features. The primary thing that drives them to not buy the retail plans is the data entitlement, obviously, and the collaboration stuff, right? And collaboration's an area we're investing more in. We may expose some of that to retail. Like a lot of it's exposed already. You can share scripts, you can share strategy, you can share scanners, you can share watch lists, right? You can share all kinds of stuff with each other. But like you can't work together on the same chart at the same time, like a Google Doc, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff's reserved for institutions, which have teams. Most retail people don't have teams. So I want to show you guys one thing since we're on this, because this is super fucking important, and I completely forgot about it earlier, and it's definitely worth showing you guys. Do you see this vertical line? Goes top to bottom on February. This is called the truth in analysis timestamp. This is how you know TrendSpider is not bullshitting you and repainting you. It's telling you exactly what price action was used to identify these trend lines. And it's the price action between this line on the left and this line on the right. Right? Everything to the right and left of these two lines was not part of this analysis, right? So if you want to refresh the analysis, you just click refresh. And now it's taking a fresh look at this chart, right? And giving you a new set of trends on it. It's meant to mimic a human. You're not going to redo your chart every time you open it. Why would TrendSpider? Right? It's going to redo it when it makes sense to redo it. And that's when you tell it to. Otherwise, it locks the analysis in place, and that keeps it honest with itself. Right, and keeps you honest with yourself, right? You know that it didn't just come up with this and take current price action in. You know exactly when that analysis took place, so you can depend on it, and you can see, is it playing out well after the fact? Like let's look at one like J&J. You know, like the last time this analysis was done here, right? In May 9th. Right. So it did bounce off this trend line. It broke below this and bounced off this, right? Like there's some validity to this, right? Maybe it's not perfect, but you can at least see how good it is. And this gives you a chance to go and tweak your settings. Because if you go and edit this right now, it's not going to refresh this line, right? It's going to reanalyze this price action here. So you can then look at this price action here and see if you're getting the results you want. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, this is cool.
So, the only time that this will automatically update is if it's like a year in the past, right? And at that point, you'll know because this will be red instead of yellow, right? So red means it's now in auto update mode. The line is too far in the past. This is actually the same reason that Rainbow doesn't work on TrendSpider, because of the history, right? It'll run out of history and then it won't be able to draw the lines in the past. Unless you manually go and zoom out and pull that data. So that's why after about like 1,000 candles or something, right, this will turn red and just start updating in real time until you refresh it to lock it again.
That's cool.